Yo, what is up, everybody? It is me, RageCage20, back with another Mr. B, Mr. Ballen story here today. We got a nice short one more before I go to bed. We got, he should never have left his cabin. ... Ellipses. Ellipsis. Ellipses. Ellipsis. Anyways, kind of like, it looks like a dude, maybe like 70s, 80s clothing. Call him maybe 20s, 30s. You see a foggy woods and whatnot. Sounds like a fantastic, creepy, dark, evil stuff in the woods, in the cabin in the woods and stuff going down. Sounds exciting. So I'm ready to get into that. Let's bring it down here. By the way, today's video apparently is brought to you by SimpliSafe Home Security. Never heard of it, but that's just details. Anyways, let's get into it. Mr. B, show me how it be. Let's go.
Today's video is brought to you by SimpliSafe. In 2016, four friends rented a small rustic cabin.
2016? Dude don't look like he from 2016, but we'll let it. We'll okay. Let's stretch our imagination. Let's pretend here. Okay.
Near a forest in a little village in Russia. Their plan was to spend the night in this cabin, and then early the next morning they would get up and they would hike this trail that would bring them to the summit of a nearby mountain. So on March 27th, the friends got in their car, they made their way to this little village, they found their cabin, they went inside, they hung out for a bit, and then by 2 a.m. they had gone to sleep. Little did they know, outside of their cabin in the forest, lurking in the darkness, something was watching their cabin's front door, waiting for one of them to come outside. But before we get into...
Whew. Whew. I like that. I like that. Now, I don't know much about the Russian wilderness, but I have not heard good things. There's that one very famous tale. I can't remember the exact stories. I know they made a very interesting video game about it that I've seen Markiplier play. To where wasn't like an expedition or something, kind of like The Thing, kind of movie. I don't know if that was based off of it or whatnot. To where they went out somewhere and like they were all found dead or something like that, or like a lot of the bodies weren't found, but some were, and they were like torn apart, like some beast creature or something fucked them up or some shit like that. Isn't that a thing that happened? And then I've also seen other videos, like horror like run-ins with like Bigfoot or the Yeti or something. It was like the Russian Yeti, and they like saw this white big burly figures like three teenagers or something, and they like turned and looked at them and started running at them. They started, either way, the Russian wilderness sounds like it's got some dangerous shit out there. So I think we should strap in, because we about to get a story here.
Today's story. If you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button hands you their phone and tells you to please take this once-in-a-lifetime photo of them, agree to do it, but leave your finger over their lens. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Siberian
when most
wilderness,
people
man.
picture Russia in their minds, they picture European Russia, which is literally the part of Russia on the western side that sits in Europe and is by far the most populated part of the country.
Oh yeah, that's not what I was picturing whenever I hear Russia. It's much like certain areas of Canada that's literally a frozen tundra wasteland. Like that is all I picture whenever I think of Russia. An imagery of any kind of civilization or urban residential areas, this imagery did not even come close to. I didn't even know they had streets and buildings like this in Russia, like a city. I assumed it was all just snow desert wasteland. So, yeah, that's not what I pictured this to be. But hey, you know, sorry to any Russian people out there. My bad.
But European Russia only accounts for 23% of the total territory that is Russia.
Right.
The other 77% is to the east of European Russia. It starts at the Ural mountain range and it extends all the way over 5 million square miles to the Pacific Ocean.
Massive.
And this vast, mostly forested expanse, which is 50
That's more of what I pictured.
times bigger than the entire United Kingdom, is called Siberia. And Siberia is absolutely brutal. In Siberia,
Yeah.
it is almost always freezing cold. Literally. The average annual temperature across all of Siberia is 32.9 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is 0.9 degrees above freezing on average every single day. In addition to the extremely deadly weather that exists basically year-round in Siberia, Siberia is also home to a bunch of huge deadly animals, such as the brown bear, which is the same as the infamous grizzly bear in North America, the gray wolf, which by size alone makes virtually all other wolves look like little puppies. Gray wolves can grow to be nearly 200 pounds.
And they always hunt in packs. And it's pretty much like a fucking dire wolf, man.
And of course, there is the highly intelligent Siberian tiger, who is perhaps one of the only predators on Earth that is known to seek out and kill people for revenge. For example, in 1997, a hunter named Vladimir Markov was walking through a Siberian forest when he came face to face with one of these Siberian tigers, and he ended up shooting the tiger before fleeing, except the tiger didn't die. Instead, it got up and secretly followed Vladimir all the way back to his cabin, and then this tiger camped out outside of the cabin until Vladimir came out again, and the tiger pounced, killed him, and ate him.
Killed the shit out of it. You think you're gonna shoot me and just walk away, bitch? Man, dude, tigers don't fuck around, dog. Tigers don't fuck around.
And so, unsurprisingly, Siberia has an absolutely minuscule population relative to its massive size. However, there are some adventurous people out there who are drawn to Siberia for the same reasons that most other people avoid it.
And there was that one dude, and I've already seen that video because Internet City did a reaction to it by Mr. Ballen, to that one dude that, I don't remember his name, but he was like a renowned hunter and whatnot, that got killed like under mysterious circumstances, and everyone's just like, oh, I got killed by a bear, but everyone's like, no, that guy would have never been caught by a bear and whatnot. He was too good at what he did and what have you. I believe he went and hunted Siberian tigers and tagged them and shit. Like, like some people just that want the challenge, you know what I mean?
These adventurous people see Siberia as one of the last truly wild places on our planet, and they want to experience it for themselves. And one of these highly adventurous people was a young man named Colin Madsen. Colin...
Yeah, the Russian makes a little bit more sense, because that is the picture. But tell me that these like 70s khakis and like oddly striped shirt doesn't just say like, this old school. Like, tell me this doesn't say this dude's coming straight from the 70s or 80s. Like, just putting it out there, this hairstyle, like, I don't know. He's looking like coming straight out of that 70s show, man. That's all I'm saying.
Who came from a very successful American family, was a big outdoors enthusiast who at some point in his youth began researching Siberia because he fell in love with its rugged natural beauty. He quickly began researching not only Siberia, but Siberian culture and Russian culture, and also at some point he became fluent in the Russian language. Then, in 2013, when Colin was 22 years old, he left his home in Missouri.
This is like a little bit of a side note. I don't want to talk for too long. It's a short one, so it shouldn't take me like too long to get through it. But just hearing him talk about becoming fluent in Russian, I was actually thinking of probably not fluent, because like I'm not really thrilled about the idea of learning a different alphabet. Like the Russian alphabet is. I will refer back to Bert Kreischer when he says star circle shoe hashtag, like fucking, it just looks like hieroglyphics for sure. And I was like, I'm not very interested in learning another alphabet. Same thing why I would never want to learn Asian kanji and shit. It's just like, trying to speak the words and understand them as they're being said to you is super fucking hard enough, let alone learn a whole other fucking alphabet on top of that. But I was always thinking to myself, after learning, if I ever become fluent in Spanish, which I might soon be able to start taking some Pimsleur and stuff. I guess I'm pretty decent in Spanish, but not conversational. And I'd like to get that point. After, if I ever get fluent with Spanish and whatnot, I was thinking of trying Russian. I do have Russians around me, so there's some benefit to doing that, but mostly also because when I was in high school and college and stuff, I was really fascinated with like Tattoo, the band, and just how the language sounded and formed in general, and also now recently, the last couple of years, Mori. I like the Russian language. So the people with what's going on in the world right now, like some of the leaders a little crazy, but then again, so are. So, what are you gonna do? That's just how it goes. But definitely a bloody past in history there. So I don't know about the people, but but the language I've always been interested in. So just came to my mind when he was talking about it. So,
and moved to Siberia. He settled in one of Siberia's few population centers, a city called Irkutsk, which is located in the southeast of Siberia and right along the edge of Lake Baikal, which is the world's deepest freshwater lake. Colin's Siberia plan was twofold. He would go to school while he was there, and he would go out and explore. And at first, his plan went perfectly. He was accepted into Moscow State Linguistic University in Irkutsk, and very quickly he made friends who were eager to accompany him on his adventures out into the Siberian wilderness. From his arrival in Siberia in 2013 to 2016, Colin did well in his studies, and he spent countless hours exploring the forests and mountainous areas all around Lake Baikal and right outside of Irkutsk. In fact, Colin became so familiar with this region that he began volunteering with a nonprofit in the area that went around marking new trails, which meant Colin was literally venturing into the wilds of Siberia and just marking the trail as he went. So when Colin's family heard about what happened to him in 2016, they could not believe it. In March of 20...
I could. It doesn't matter how good people think they are with nature. I'd say a good 50 to 75% of it is you're just getting lucky that either you weren't spotted by some crazy, powerful, intelligent, predatory beast, or you're incredibly lucky that they just weren't interested in you that day. You know what I mean? Like you can be the quickest quick draw, big old fucking gun, and like be super heightened aware, but like humans just don't have the same senses that these beasts are. Like a tiger, for example, our perception, both eyesight and hearing, is not nearly as good as theirs. Our speed is not as good as theirs. Their ability to be on you and kill you before you can even blink is incredible. Their stealth check is through the fucking roof. Pretty sure they even got an advantage on stealth checks. Like, they are just insane fucking predators. So it doesn't matter how fucking good you think you are, they're better. So it's just like every time you go out there, you're rolling the dice. Eventually, since we're using D&D terms anyways, eventually you're going to roll nat 1, man. They say, eventually you're going to roll a nat fucking 1, man. It's just gonna happen. Like, it ain't a surprise to me.
2016, Colin and 3 of his good hiking friends, one was American and 2 were Russian, decided they wanted to go on a hike together. They settled on hiking to the summit of Love Peak, which was a mountain located a few hours away from Irkutsk in a small village called Arshan. This hike was nothing compared to the gnarly Siberian wilderness hikes all 4 of these guys had been on before. The trail that led up to Love Peak, it was fairly steep, but it was incredibly well marked, and all 4 of these guys had hiked it several times before. However, because Colin and his friends were so experienced at hiking in Siberia, they knew that even the easiest hikes needed to be respected, because Siberia was still Siberia. There were dangers that lurked everywhere. And so the men called ahead to the village of Arshan, and they rented one of these small rustic cabins that's in the village that sits right at the base of Love.
Oh, that's the cabin. I mean, it's surrounded by civilization. Well, at least a form of civilization. But still, like, you're trying to keep out the beasts of Siberia. And this rain shack motherfucker probably just tear the door down themselves and be like, surprise, bitches. You know what I mean? Like, you think that's gonna stop a Yeti or a tiger? The tiger could get right up on here and right inside this decrepit fucking door, man. That's all I'm saying. Anyways.
Of Peak, and it's kind of tucked away in this forest, and so this cabin would serve as their sort of base camp and would allow them to arrive in Arshan, get their gear together, and then when they were ready, they could begin this hike to the summit. And so a few days later, on March 27th, Colin and his 3 friends loaded up their car and they drove west to Arshan, and when they got there, they stopped at a local store and got some supplies and then made their way to their cabin. Their cabin was just a single room with a few beds inside of it. It was enough to protect them from the elements, but really nothing more. As for a toilet, the cabin didn't have one, but there was an outhouse outside that they could use.
Like, I get it. I get that, because, you know, it's very American to expect, like, why is there not a toilet inside? But also, at the same time, like, someone has to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. You want them to walk outside? Not only freezing temperatures, but also that's when they get you. That's when the predators get you, man. Like, why wouldn't that be inside, or at least connected to the inside of the house, so you could just step into it, which is technically outside or something? You know what I mean? Like, okay, whatever, man, whatever. Let's see how it goes.
So after the friends moved into the cabin and claimed their beds and put their things down, they all sat down and began prepping their gear and eating some food and chatting. And then finally, at 2 a.m., they decided they needed to go to sleep because their plan was to get on the path up to Love Peak by 7 a.m., which meant they needed to get up at 5 a.m. to make their final preparation.
Yeah, 3 hours of sleep to go on a big hiking trip. That's all you need.
So at 2 a.m., the lights in the cabin turned off and the friends all fell asleep. And then 3 hours later, at 5 a.m., when the lights came back on again, it was immediately clear something was wrong. Colin was not in his bed. His friends assumed, when they looked over at his bed and saw his personal belongings were all still there, that Colin must have gotten up and headed outside, maybe to use the outhouse or go for a quick walk, and they just hadn't heard him leaving. And so the 3 friends initially just kind of shrugged off Colin's absence and said, you know, he'll be back any minute, most likely, and if for some reason he's not back soon, he'll certainly be back by 7 a.m., because that was the agreed upon time they would leave for this hike. Right. But as the minutes ticked closer and closer to 7 a.m., and Colin still had not shown up or tried to call them or do anything, the friends started to worry. It just didn't make any sense that Colin would just get up and leave without telling them where he was going. Finally, at 7 a.m., when Colin still had not shown up, and the friends' cursory search of the outside area near the cabin had yielded no results, they decided they had to tell someone. And so they wrote a note addressed to Colin, and they put it on the front of their cabin door. And this note basically just told Colin, you know, if you come back here and you see this note, know that we're looking for you. So stay put or tell someone you're here. And so after putting up this note, the friends left the cabin and they headed...
Wait. I know there was an American with them, but the real photo of the note left in the cabin, why is it in English? If they're in Russia, he speaks Russian. He's fluent in Russian, so maybe he just can't read Russian, which again, I don't blame him. It's really hard to do. Okay, I guess that must be the reason. I would assume that has to be the reason, because I was like, why is it not in Russian?
Tell someone you're here. And so after putting up this note...
I mean, it could also be Russian and English alphabet. Like, that is also a thing. I mean, I don't know, whatever.
The friends left the cabin and they headed to the nearest police station where they reported Colin missing. The police would eventually launch this huge search in and around Arshan, both in the forested area right around the village and then also up into the mountains near Love Peak. But despite this huge effort, no one could find Colin, at least not at first.
The safety thing.
A couple of months ago, I was laying in bed when I heard this strange tapping sound coming from my downstairs. Now, as I'm laying there, I'm trying to run through the different scenarios of what this sound could be when this tapping sound...
Imagine if you tell all these kind of stories and stuff.
Like SimpliSafe.
Okay. And like any of these events like start happening to you, maybe like all the stories start running through your head. It's like, okay, well this happened, so it could have been this. But I remember the story and this happened. It could also be that. I wonder if that's ever happened to Ballen here. That'd be funny. It could be useful.
Okay, back to the story. On Monday, April 4th, so 8 days into Colin's disappearance, a group of searchers were looking in the forest about 1 mile away from the cabin where Colin and his friends had been staying. And they look up ahead and they see there is this clearing and there's something in the middle of it. And so the searchers begin moving their way towards this clearing, ducking under branches and stepping over brush. And when they get close enough, they can see Colin is in the clearing. And Colin is deceased. He was laying flat on his back with his left arm extended out to the side and his right arm extended but closer to his body, and both of his hands were clenched in tight fists. And on his hands and his wrists were visible abrasions and cuts, which later would be determined to have most likely been caused from someone or something holding onto him, trying to restrain Colin. Colin also had visible abrasions and cuts on the front of his neck. Colin's clothing, which consisted of a long-sleeve thermal shirt, heavy pants, and hiking boots, were ripped and torn in several places. And interestingly, Colin was not wearing socks under his boots. Now that seems inconsequential, but Colin had had surgery on both of his ankles and had scar tissue on his ankles that if he didn't have socks on, those scars would rub against the inside of his boot, and he said it was very painful. So he always wore socks.
That and also it's Siberia. You're gonna want to wear socks.
Also, Colin's body showed virtually no signs of decomposition, and all of his wounds and abrasions looked, quote, fresh, according to medical personnel. In short, Colin looked like he had recently been in some sort of physical altercation, and whoever or whatever he was grappling with had eventually overpowered him and killed him, although it was not clear how he actually died. Russian authorities were very quick to suspect Colin's 3 friends who had been with him, but they were brought into the station and they denied having anything to do with Colin's death, and they all passed their lie detector tests. After that, Russian authorities quickly closed this case by concluding that, well, if his friends didn't do it, then that means Colin must have been high on drugs or drinking alcohol or both, and he just wandered out of his cabin and he got lost in the woods, and he died of hypothermia. He froze to death. The end. However,
that doesn't explain abrasions and injuries. I mean, maybe cuts just walking around in the woods all careless and drunk and shit, but like abrasions, he might be able to do it himself, but that's pushing it.
Colin's parents just could not accept that as being what happened to their son. There were a lot of reasons for skepticism, but the main one was that Colin was an absolute expert at navigating this particular region of Siberia. And so the idea that he would leave his cabin for a quick walk or something and get so completely lost that he would die 8 days later seemed way too far-fetched. And so Colin's parents hired a US-based private lab to do a review of Russia's autopsy of Colin to give their opinion if the autopsy was accurate or not. And this US-based lab pretty much immediately found that the Russian autopsy was not remotely accurate. Number one, Colin was not under the influence of alcohol or drugs. He was sober.
Right.
Although, technically, he did have very small amounts of THC in his urine. THC is the chemical that is found in marijuana.
Yeah, okay, he was puffing a little. All right, I get it, Okay. I was gonna get a little stereotypical. I was gonna say, maybe a little vodka or something, just not like drunk or anything, but y'all chit chatting, in the crib, in the cabin, maybe some little vodka going,
But the amount was so little, it basically meant he had consumed the THC days before he went missing. Right. And so he would not have been remotely affected by that small amount of THC in his system. Yeah. Number two, the lab determined that Colin almost certainly did not die from hypothermia. Instead, all signs pointed to Colin dying from being suffocated, meaning he was murdered. Someone crushed his airway or in some way restricted him from breathing, and that's what killed him. And three, based on the lack of decomposition, the freshness of the injuries on Colin's body, and the lack of animal predation on his body when they found him, indicated that Colin did not just wander out of his cabin and immediately die somewhere in the forest. Instead, he was alive for most of the time people were looking for him, meaning when they found him, he likely had died within hours of being found. And
damn. Yeah, no, if it was an animal, especially an animal out there, like, even if it was a revenge kill, as tigers are known to do, apparently, Siberian tigers at least, and elephants, apparently. That story's fucking hilarious, man. But they would have most certainly eaten him. Like, they would have just killed him and been like, oh, well, our job's done. I laid down him and suffocated him, So that means it was probably human, or at least humanoid. Yet he's still not ruled out in this situation.
So these findings by this US-based lab kind of create a general theory about what must have happened to Colin. After Colin left the cabin in the early morning hours of March 28th, maybe to go to the outhouse or to go for a quick walk, when he went outside, someone or something was nearby, and they either lured Colin to them or they straight up ambushed Colin and took him away. Now, we have no idea what happened to Colin after he was abducted, but we can safely assume that after being abducted and taken somewhere, he was alive, and he stayed alive for several days until on the 8th day of his disappearance, Colin was killed, likely by his captor, either at the spot where he was found, or he was killed somewhere else, maybe in the forest, and then moved to the spot where he was found. Many people believe it was the Russian government who targeted Colin, they kidnapped him, and they killed him. And their botched investigation into his death was actually a calculated cover-up. Colin had participated in at least one peaceful environmentalist-led protest in Siberia. And after the protest, Colin apparently got a written warning by the Russian police not to attend another protest. But why?
I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know if he's about to contradict something here, because, like, again, talking about the things that are going on in Russia. I mean, I haven't looked into any of this information. Whatnot. All I have is purely second-party information given to me by people who have paid attention to the news and whatnot. Whether any of it's true or not, I don't know, and I don't give a fuck. So don't come at me. Um, but it sounds like there's, when Putin started doing his crazy ass fucking shit, it sounds like there was a lot of Russian people that spoke out against what he was doing and whatnot, and disagreed, and salute, and hats off to those people for knowing what your government's going to do to you. Like, you speak out in Russia, you go missing. Like, you go missing, you ain't never found again. So, like, absolute respect to the people that was like, this is so wrong, we should not be doing this, we're gonna speak out against what's happening. And absolute respect. But yeah, no, they protested, and I don't, they were arrested and taken away. My guess is they went bye-bye, and they gonna stay bye-bye. You know what I mean? Because it's Putin. Motherfucking not all there. So that theory does hold some weight in Russia. If the police themselves are like, hey man, you fuck up like this again, we coming for you. But if it was Russian police, it's Russia, man. They could have come and said, hey, a person's missing, we need to go do a search, and they'd be like, nah, he's probably out there somewhere, just go look for him. He's fine. He's probably fine. They don't have to show any signs of giving two fucks. Because it's Russia, like, there are no rules in Russia, man. Like, the police and the government hold the power, and they don't give a fuck. Just from what I've heard from testimonies and media and stuff, who knows if any of that's true, but that's just my assumption. So if it was the police, they probably wouldn't have sent a search for him, probably wouldn't have given two shits. So it's also a possibility that that's not true.
Why would Colin, who was just one of many people involved in these protests, be singled out by the Russian government and killed for his participation?
Because he's American. That just be my assumption. I don't know.
And why would the government elect to kill Colin when he was with three of his closest friends who would immediately notice his absence?
Because give no fucks in Russian, man. If they say anything, they go missing too. I mean, I don't think they would give a fuck, I'm gonna be honest with you.
It just doesn't add up. Today, Colin's parents are still trying to figure out what happened to their son, but unfortunately, their son's case is closed in Russia, and so no one on the Russian side is talking to the parents or giving them any new information. And so as a result, they and the rest of us are left to wonder who or what was lurking in the shadows when Colin stepped out of the cabin that morning. And then where did they take him? And what did they do to him for nearly a week before they killed him deep inside of that Siberian forest? So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode.
I mean, I know a lot of this is... Sorry, any Russian people watching this, I'm really sorry. I actually had a Russian person comment me in Russian. I don't know how to pronounce the alphabet. I call it Cyrillic or something like that. I don't know if that's correct, or Cyrillic or something. I don't know. But in that alphabet, and I responded back in that alphabet and whatnot. I ain't gonna lie, it was Google Translate. It didn't work perfectly, and I had to edit some of it in English. But because I had a typo, so it lost its mind and said some weird shit. But so sorry, because I know Russian people do occasionally watch this, and it's all stereotypes. There's tons about the U.S., and I find them hilarious. So, let's all laugh at ourselves from time to time. That's all I'm saying here. But in all honesty, from just what I've heard, I know this is back in the day and whatnot, but from what I've heard from different media sources, like comedy bits or television and movies and stuff, like obviously it's not an accurate representation of what the place is actually like, and I understand that. It's just funny. But some of it's got to be true. You know what I mean? You know, some of it's got to be true. And honestly, in Russia, I would not be surprised if it's the government's very much like, hey, you speak up, you go missing. Ain't no one gonna find you. We even have some of that goes down in the U.S. So, you know what I'm saying? So it's not that far fetched to believe. But so like when he said, why would the government, the police, or whatever do that when clearly, his friends would know and report right away? It's because what are they gonna do? Like, as the case is kind of cold, they're not even looking. What are the friends gonna do? Friends gonna be like, we think you guys did it. Okay. Well, guess what? Your family ain't ever gonna know what happened to you either. You know what I mean? What's the people gonna do? You know what I'm saying? So like, it's still a possibility because I don't think they would straight no fucks would have been given. But yeah. Why would he be singled out of all the people participating? Again, American. It's one thing when you people are like, hey, let me protest, but when American shows up and it's just like, hey, I'm gonna fight against you guys too, just because I learned your language and I'm studying here, you might single and target that person out. A lot of people don't like Americans. Yeah, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's a lot of Russians that probably don't care too much for Americans. You know? Especially in the governmental area. So I could see all of that being a possibility. That's not far fetched to me. That is absolutely not far fetched to me. But yeah, definitely ruling out predators. Because I mean, abrasions like that from dragging, if it was any kind of like all the predators out there seem to be quadrupedal, like wolves and bears and whatnot. So they would have to drag by their mouth, and that would leave deep lacerations in the body, or these different kinds of marks on the body. So, and again, they would probably eat them. So probably not that. Probably some humanoid. Again, let's not rule out the Yeti. That's what I think happened. Yeti. You let me know what you think happened. Sorry to all my Russian people again. And I hope you enjoyed. I don't know what the next one is. I think we're going back downwards. And I don't remember which one that was because I've seen. Oh, yeah. The girl's about to live a nightmare or something like that. It's like a 15-minute or. Yeah. That should be interesting. So come join me for that. And I will see you all next time.